The Forgotten Echo. The Council of Sovereign Worlds convened in the crystalline halls of Station Terminus, a structure older than most civilizations in the known galaxy. Representatives from 247 species gathered beneath vaulted ceilings that captured and reflected starlight in patterns meant to inspire unity. Today, however, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Ambassador Kelrith of the Voskin Collective adjusted his sensory stalks as he reviewed the data streaming across his neural interface. The readings made no sense. A signal, a transmission, coming from a region of space that had been silent for over 11,000 years. "The readings are confirmed," announced Prime Mediator Scythene, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. Sector 97 Alpha has registered technological activity. The quarantine zone has been breached from within. A murmur rippled through the assembled delegates. Sector 97 Alpha? The dead zone? The forbidden expanse? It had a dozen names across a dozen languages, but all meant the same thing: the graveyard of humanity. Kelrith felt his chromatophore shift to a deep purple, the Voskin expression of unease. He had studied the ancient records, the ones most civilizations preferred to forget, the stories of the humans and their impossible wars, the tales of a species so relentless, so adaptive, that they had nearly burned the galaxy to ash before they mysteriously vanished. "Impossible," croaked Ambassador Thulrak, his amphibious bulk quivering. "The humans are extinct. The Cleansing Coalition made certain of that. Their worlds were glassed, their colonies destroyed, their fleets scattered to atoms." "And yet," Scythene continued, her crystalline form carrying perfect calm, "we are detecting power signatures consistent with fusion reactors, antimatter containment systems, and quantum-fold communications, technologies that match human specifications from the final war." The chamber erupted. Some delegates demanded immediate military mobilization. Others suggested diplomacy. A few, mostly the younger species who knew humanity only as myth, laughed at what they considered paranoid delusions. Kelrith remained silent, his mind racing through the historical archives stored in his genetic memory. The Voskins had been there, at the end. They had witnessed what happened when humanity was pushed to the brink. The images still haunted their collective consciousness. Human ships ramming through superior forces, human soldiers fighting with broken limbs and failing life support, human settlements choosing mass suicide over surrender, then rigging their corpses with explosives for one final blow. Humanity had not fought like any other species. They did not calculate acceptable losses or engage in strategic withdrawals when logic dictated. They fought with something the galaxy had never truly understood: a refusal to accept the concept of defeat. When their fleets were destroyed, they built guerrilla ships from asteroid debris. When their soldiers fell, the survivors grew fiercer. When their worlds burned, they turned the ashes into weapons. The Cleansing Coalition, an alliance of 17 species, had united specifically to eliminate the human threat. It had taken them 2 centuries, cost them billions of lives, and required the complete sterilization of 37 star systems. In the end, they had cornered the last human strongholds in Sector 97 Alpha and unleashed weapons that tore the fabric of space itself. For 11,000 years, the sector had remained a twisted knot of radiation and broken physics. No ship could enter without being shredded by dimensional rifts. No signal could escape the cascading quantum disruptions. Until now. "I propose we send a reconnaissance fleet," suggested Ambassador Valora of the Trinith Dominion, her 6 eyes gleaming with curiosity. The Trinith were a young species, barely 5,000 spacefaring. She had no memory of what humanity had been. "You propose we poke the sleeping nightmare? Have you no concept of what humanity was capable of?" "Was," Valora emphasized. "Past tense. Whatever is transmitting from that sector cannot possibly be the humans of legend. Time, radiation, isolation, nothing could have survived in that hell for over 10,000 years. I was born with the memories of my ancestors. I carry the testimony of those who fought in the final campaigns. Let me share what they witnessed." He activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. Images materialized. Grainy, ancient recordings of the last days of the human wars. The assembled delegates watched in silence as human soldiers, outnumbered and surrounded, chose to detonate their own ships rather than allow their technology to be captured. They watched human scientists working until their fingers bled to design weapons, medicines, anything that might give their species one more day. They watched human children evacuated from dying worlds, singing songs of defiance while their parents burned in orbital bombardment. "This," Kelrith said quietly, "this is what survived genocide, plague, and betrayal. This is what nearly conquered the galaxy despite being outgunned, outnumbered, and out-evolved. And you believe time and suffering would break them?" The chamber fell into uncomfortable silence. "I have studied human psychology extensively," Kelrith continued. "They possess a trait that most species develop only in individuals, never as a cultural constant. They call it spite. The human ability to endure suffering not because victory is likely, but because surrender is unthinkable. If even a fragment of humanity survived in that sector, they have spent 11,000 years doing one thing: preparing for the day they could return." Scythene's crystalline face remained unreadable, but her voice carried a note of decision. "The Council will authorize a reconnaissance mission. One heavy cruiser, the Eternal Vigilance, will approach the boundary of Sector 97 Alpha. They will deploy long-range scanning drones and attempt communication. Under no circumstances will they cross into the quarantine zone without further authorization." "And if they make contact?" asked Valora. Kelrith's chromatophore shifted to the deep crimson of dread. "Then we pray that humanity has forgotten how to hate." The vote was called. The mission was approved. And deep in the archives of the Voskin Collective, ancient warning protocols began activating, systems designed 11,000 years ago for a threat the galaxy had convinced itself no longer existed. In Sector 97 Alpha, something stirred. Power grids that had lain dormant for millennia sparked to life. Shipyards carved into the hearts of dead moons hummed with renewed purpose. And in a vault deep beneath the surface of a shattered world, a message played on repeat. A message that had been waiting, patient and certain, for this exact moment. They will come looking for us. When they do, remember, we did not start this war, but we will end it. The Eternal Vigilance. Captain Zorath stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance, her forearms folded in a posture that conveyed confidence to her crew. She was Drachneth, a species renowned for their tactical brilliance and 300-year lifespan that gave them patience most others lacked. She had captained this vessel for 42 years and had seen combat against pirates, insurgents, and even a brief border skirmish with the Turellian swarms. but nothing in her extensive experience had prepared her for this mission. "Distance to Sector 97 Alpha boundary," she asked, her secondary arms manipulating the holographic tactical display. 45 million kilometers and closing," reported Lieutenant Vexus from the navigation station. "Quantum disruption readings are increasing exponentially. The closer we get, the more unstable local space becomes." Zorath studied the sensor readings with growing unease. The edge of the quarantine zone was a roiling wall of distorted space-time, like reality itself had been shattered and poorly glued back together. Streams of exotic radiation poured from the rifts, particles that shouldn't exist according to standard physics. "Launch the first wave of scanning drones," she commanded. "Keep them at maximum safe distance. I want detailed scans of that anomaly." 6 drones shot forward, their advanced shielding barely adequate for the task ahead. Zorath watched their telemetry as they approached the boundary. The data they transmitted was extraordinary. Within the quarantine zone, space itself was folded in impossible configurations. Gravity wells where no mass existed, electromagnetic spectrums that included colors her instruments couldn't classify. And beneath it all, like a heartbeat, a regular pulse of directed energy. Something was definitely active inside. "Captain," called out her communications officer, a Trinith named Savros. "I'm detecting a transmission. It's an old coalition standard, the human diplomatic language." Every head on the bridge turned toward him. Old coalition standard hadn't been spoken in over 10,000 years. The language had died with humanity and been relegated to historical archives. "Play it," Zorath ordered, her voice steady despite the ice forming in her blood. The speakers crackled with static. Then a voice emerged, artificial, but with an unsettling warmth to its tone. It spoke in perfectly articulated Old Coalition standard, each syllable precise. "Attention, unidentified vessels. You are approaching the Terran Protectorate exclusion zone. This is your only warning. Unauthorized entry is prohibited under Accord 773 of the Coalition Charter, subsection 12. Violators will be detained or destroyed at the discretion of Protectorate Defense Forces. You have 60 seconds to alter your course to bearing 937 and retreat beyond minimum safe distance." Silence consumed the bridge. Zorath felt all 4 of her hearts accelerating. "That accord was signed 11,000 years ago," whispered Vexus. "The coalition it refers to hasn't existed for 10 millennia." Savros's 6 eyes were wide with shock. "Captain, the transmission is coming from inside the exclusion zone, deep inside, and it's addressing us as if the war never ended." Zorath's tactical mind raced through options. Respond. Use Old Coalition standard. Inform them that we are a peaceful reconnaissance mission authorized by the Council of Sovereign Worlds. Request permission to communicate. Savros's manipulator appendages trembled as he worked. Transmitting now. The seconds stretched into eternity. Zorath found herself calculating engagement scenarios despite the absurdity. If humans had somehow survived in that hellscape, their technology would be ancient. Her ship was equipped with cutting-edge weapons, shields that could withstand direct hits from antimatter torpedoes, and faster-than-light drives that could escape any threat. The response came faster than she expected. Unidentified vessels have failed to provide proper authentication and have violated Terran Protectorate space. Under wartime emergency protocols, you are hereby classified as hostile. However, as you are retreating and have not opened fire, we are exercising restraint. You have 30 seconds to exit the exclusion zone. After that, the Terran Home Fleet will consider you legitimate targets. Zorath felt a laugh building in her chest, the kind that emerged when reality became too absurd to process otherwise. Home Fleet. They had called 6 ancient, damaged warships a home fleet. And yet, despite the absurdity, those ships were tracking her vessel with perfect precision. "How fast are we moving?" she demanded. "Maximum subluminal speed, Captain. We'll cross their boundary in 90 seconds. Those 90 seconds felt like years. Zorath watched the human ships pace them, maintaining perfect formation despite the reality-warping conditions of the exclusion zone's edge. Their movement patterns were flawless. Professional. This wasn't automated defense. There were people, humans, crewing those vessels. The Eternal Vigilance crossed the boundary. Immediately, the targeting locks disengaged. The human ships held position, not pursuing. "They're letting us go," Vexus said, disbelief coloring her words. The final transmission came through.
Your retreat has been noted. Transmit the following message to your superiors. The Terran Protectorate remains in full defensive posture. We will defend our territory against all aggression. We await contact from proper coalition authorities to discuss ceasefire terms. Until such contact is established, any vessel entering the exclusion zone will be destroyed without further warning. This is not a threat. This is a promise. The channel closed. Zorath stared at the view screen as the human ships turned and disappeared back into the quantum chaos of Sector 97 Alpha. Her crew was silent, each processing what they had just witnessed. Savros, he said quietly, compile everything. Every sensor reading, every transmission, every image. The Council needs to see this. Captain, Dulath spoke up, his warrior's instincts clear in his tone. Those ships, their weapons. I ran combat simulations based on the energy signatures. If they had fired, they would have crippled us, possibly destroyed us. Their technology might be ancient, but it's been maintained, upgraded. They've had 11,000 years to prepare. Zorath nodded slowly. And they've spent every one of those years believing they were still at war, believing they were still defending humanity's last stand. She turned to face her crew. We just discovered something the galaxy thought was extinct, but we didn't find ruins. We found survivors, and they're still armed, still organized, still waiting. Waiting for what? Asked Vexus. Zorath looked back at the exclusion zone, now shrinking behind them. For the enemy to return, and from their perspective, we are that enemy.
The Council's Reckoning. The emergency session of the Council of Sovereign Worlds was unlike anything in modern galactic history. Every seat was filled, every species present. The holographic recordings from the Eternal Vigilance played on endless loops while delegates argued, panicked, and demanded action. Ambassador Kelrith watched it all with grim vindication. He had warned them. The humans had not been destroyed. They had been isolated, besieged, and forgotten, but not destroyed. "We must establish a military blockade immediately," demanded Admiral Cross of the Tyrallian swarms, his insectoid features twisted with aggression. "Contain them before they can rebuild their forces." "Blockade?" Ambassador Velora's voice dripped with scorn. "Based on Captain Zorath's report, they already have forces. 6 warships appeared within minutes. How many more do you think they've built in 11,000 years? "It's impossible," insisted Thulrak, though his voice lacked conviction. "They were refugees, survivors trapped in a radiation hell. How could they manufacture anything in that environment?" Kelrith stood, his chromophores pulsing with urgency. "You are asking the wrong questions. You should be asking how humanity, even a tiny remnant, survived at all in conditions that should have killed them within decades. You should be asking what they've been doing for 11,000 years besides surviving. And most importantly, you should be asking what happens when they discover the cleansing coalition deliberately tried to genocide their entire species." The chamber fell silent. Prime Mediator Sethine's crystalline form caught the light in sharp patterns. "Ambassador Kelrith is correct. We are approaching this situation with assumptions that may prove fatal. The humans encountered by the Eternal Vigilance believe they are still fighting the coalition war. They believe their isolation was a tactical situation, not permanent exile. They are awaiting contact from what they call proper coalition authorities to discuss ceasefire terms." "Ceasefire," Admiral Cross laughed harshly. "There was no ceasefire, there was extermination. What do you imagine will happen when these humans learn the truth?" The question hung in the air like a poison cloud. A new voice spoke up, soft, measured, belonging to Ambassador Liss of the Chorus Unity, a species renowned for their psychological expertise. "I have analyzed the transmissions from the human automated systems, the language patterns, the protocol references, the emphasis on defensive posture. These humans are not aggressive, they are terrified." "Terrified?" several delegates echoed in disbelief. Liss continued, her melodious voice carrying across the chamber. "Consider their perspective. They survived what must have seemed like the apocalypse. They've huddled in a dead zone for 11,000 years, maintaining military discipline, keeping ancient weapons functional, teaching each generation that the enemy could return at any moment. When Captain Zorath's ship approached, what did they see? An unknown vessel probing their boundaries. From their view, the war never ended. They're still the defenders of the last human worlds, still waiting for the next attack. Kelrith felt something unexpected. Pity. These humans had been soldiers on watch for longer than most civilizations had existed. They had turned their prison into a fortress, their desperation into discipline. They had survived by never allowing themselves to believe they were beaten. "We must make contact," Valora stated. "Real contact. Explain what has happened. Offer peace." And if they don't accept, if they decide the galaxy owes them vengeance for the cleansing, Thulrak's throat sac inflated fully. Then we face exactly what the Cleansing Coalition tried to prevent. A human species with 11,000 years of accumulated rage, advanced weaponry, and nothing left to lose. Scythene raised her crystalline arms for silence. "The Council will authorize a diplomatic mission. Ambassador Kelrith, given your expertise in human history and your people's direct experience with humanity, you will lead this delegation. You will enter Sector 97 Alpha with appropriate identification codes from the old Coalition era. You will inform the humans of what has transpired and offer full Council recognition of their sovereignty." "And if they refuse peace?" Kelrith asked quietly. "Then we discover exactly how much of the legendary human ferocity is myth, and how much is simply truth we tried to bury." Kelrith accepted the assignment with a resignation that felt ancient. As the session adjourned, he accessed the deepest levels of his genetic memory, searching for anything that might help him communicate with the humans. What he found terrified him. His ancestors had fought alongside humans briefly before the Coalition fractured. They remembered human laughter, human art, human love for their families. But they also remembered human rage when those families were threatened. They remembered a human capacity for sacrifice. They remembered a species that saw every setback as a challenge, every defeat as a lesson, every loss as fuel for their next attempt. The Cleansing Coalition had tried to destroy humanity because they feared what humans might become. Now the galaxy was about to discover what humans had become when given 11,000 years to prepare. 3 days later, Kelrith departed on the diplomatic vessel Olive Branch, a name chosen carefully from ancient human peace symbolism. His crew was small, just essential personnel and specialists in ancient human culture. They carried data cores containing 11,000 years of galaxy history, medical supplies, food synthesizers, and a message of peace. They also carried, though few knew it, a dead man's switch. If the mission failed, if the Olive Branch was destroyed, military protocols across the galaxy would activate. Every species would mobilize. Every fleet would prepare. The galaxy would go to war once again against humanity. As they approached the boundary of Sector 97 Alpha, Kelrith composed a message in Old Coalition Standard, hoping the ancient words would bridge 11,000 years of silence. "This is Ambassador Kelrith of the Voskan Collective, representing the Council of Sovereign Worlds. I come under the white banner of truce, bearing truths you must hear and offers of peace you must consider. The war is over. The coalition that you knew no longer exists. The galaxy has changed beyond recognition. We request permission to speak with you, not as enemies, but as those who would right ancient wrongs. Please respond." He transmitted the message and waited. Deep in Sector 97 Alpha, in command centers carved into dead moons, in warships that had been repaired and rebuilt 1,000 times, in underground cities where children had been born who had never seen a natural sky, the message was received. And humanity, after 11,000 years of silence, began to decide what to do about a galaxy that had tried to murder them. In the command center of the Resolute, flagship of the Terran Home Fleet, Admiral Sarah Chen,
descended from the original crew that had survived the cleansing, leader of a people who had endured the undurable, stared at the translated message. Her hands, covered in the calluses of a lifetime maintaining aging systems, trembled slightly. "Prepare a response," she ordered, her voice carrying the weight of generations. "And activate the deep reserves. If this is a trick, if this is another attempt to finish what they started, we will show them exactly what 11,000 years of preparation looks like." Around her, officers moved with practiced efficiency. They had drilled for this moment since childhood. They had maintained weapons their grandparents had built. They had preserved not just their technology, but their purpose. Humanity had survived, and now the galaxy would learn what that meant.